Hey guys, so today I'm going to be doing my August wrap up. I can't believe it's already the end of the month. I actually read so many books this month. I'm really surprised at myself, so happy about that. But as usual, I'm going to be talking about all of these books from my least favourite, working my way through to my most favourite. So the first book, and it was my only 2-star rating for the month, was The May Queen Murders by Sarah Jude. This is a YA mystery thriller kind of novel, and it's about a community that lives somewhat segregated from the rest of society, although the kids in this book still go to school with other kids like from the nearby town and everything. So yeah, but basically the story leads up to the May Day celebrations when they're going to elect a May Queen, and in the lead up to this night animals are showing up dead, and there's a lot of old superstitions and things, and people are kind of getting freaked out. And then on the night of the May Day celebration there are some humans that end up dead as well. So it's basically just trying to figure out like who's behind all of these horrible things. This book for me, as you can probably tell with my 2-star rating, was kind of a disappointment. I just didn't find it spooky or creepy or atmospheric or anything like that, and it lacked that kind of mysterious, thrilling aspect, which is kind of important. The storytelling made me feel not very attached to the characters. I felt like it was very surface level and I didn't really get to know them, so I didn't really care about what was going on in the plot either. With the ending, I was disappointed by that, which is kind of the main thing with this book for me. The ending didn't live up to what I would like in a mystery thriller. There were just so many twists and reveals that it started to feel really over the top and silly, and not in a good way. Wasn't a huge fan of this book. So moving on to my 3-star reads for the month. The first one was that I finally finished reading Understanding the Victorians. This is a textbook that I had to read for uni, and as you can imagine, it's just about the Victorian era. It was a good overview, but aside from that, I wouldn't necessarily like recommend it to you unless you have to read this for class. I think there are probably just better written, more interesting books on the Victorian period and like specific aspects of it. My next 3-star read is one that I was really excited about. So the fact that it's 3 stars for me, like it wasn't bad, but it was a little bit disappointing, was Orphan Island by Laurel Snyder. This one is about a bunch of kids that are living on an island, and I think it's about every year or so, another child, a really young child, arrives in a boat mysteriously, like on their own, and one of the older children, the eldest one, has to get in the boat and the boat takes them away. And they don't really know why any of this has to happen, but it's just what they've been told by the older children, and like it's just been passed on for like generations of orphans on this island, I suppose. So they just kind of do what they're supposed to do. And the book gives you an insight into their daily life, and you feel like it's going to like uncover the mysteries of this island and why it's set up and what it does and things like that. So a very interesting concept, and I was really excited to read it. At the beginning of it, it really gave me Maze Runner vibes. If you've read the Maze Runner series, you know what I mean, but those kids are like, they arrive mysteriously in a box in a maze, and there are other kids living there, and they have to go out into the maze every day to try and like find their way out or something. It's been a long time since I've read that series, but it kind of gave me similar vibes to that at the beginning. However, what disappointed me with this book is that nothing is actually explained. It was really anticlimactic for me, and I just wanted to know what was going on and why this island existed. And you kind of get the feeling that the author knows, but she doesn't tell you anything. And it's, yeah, just nothing is explained, and that really irritated me because that's what I wanted to find out about this book. Otherwise, I understand it's basically an extended metaphor for childhood and growing up, as you can imagine, with the eldest child having to leave the island, which is like going into adulthood or being a teenager, I guess, and in the lead up to them leaving, they're having to take care of the youngest child, so it's giving them that push of like realizing that they're older now and giving them a sense of responsibility and things like that. So I get the extended metaphor, I just didn't find it really interesting or really moving or impactful or anything like that. It was just a bit dull, and yeah, just considering the length of this book, like it's middle grade, so it only took me a couple of days to read. I just think for the length of it, nothing really happens, and that was really disappointing to me. I just wanted to know why these children were there and how they got there and how it all started. And you don't find that out. So my next 3-star read was a novel that I had to read for uni, and it is called Things Fall Apart. This is set before and after the time of colonization in a tribal village in Nigeria. It follows in particular one man and his life and his family, and he sees himself as a very like manly man. He's you know, strong, and he works hard and all that kind of thing, but at the perception of like the other people in his village, they see him as like a bit too harsh at times. It essentially follows what happens to him throughout his life, what life was like before missionaries and British people arrived, and what happened after that as well, and how that kind of tore the village apart. This book was interesting to me. I was very, very interested in the story and interested to see the way of life in this village and their different traditions and different beliefs and everything, but I didn't have that emotional attachment to this book. Next, this month also for uni, I had 2 3-star Shakespeare plays that I read. The first one is Measure for Measure. This is essentially about a duke. He is going away for a short time, so he appoints someone else to, you know, have control of the laws and stuff like that while he's away, but he doesn't actually go away. He disguises himself as a monk, I believe, something like that, and hangs around and observes what happens when he's away. So the man who is standing in his place while he's away decides that fornication is really bad, and he puts up a man for execution for that. This one was okay for me. I found it kind of like mildly entertaining, but it was just okay. I don't know, it didn't really stand out to me, but I did like the overall message of it, which is like to expect others to kind of like treat you how you've treated them. So if you're really harsh on someone, expect them to be harsh back to you when the time comes. Like, I really like that as a message, but overall this play was just a little bit underwhelming compared to other Shakespeare plays that I've read. The other 3-star Shakespeare play for me this month was Henry V. I think I liked this one a little bit more than Measure for Measure, but yeah, it still wasn't my favourite. It had its moments that I really, really enjoyed, but mostly it's about Henry V, who is a king in England, and he decides that he wants to go to war with France because he wants to try and become the king of France as well as England. I'm just not someone who's interested in the ins and outs of war. However, I did really like the French princess, I think, Catherine. She was hilarious, and the scenes with her and Alice when Catherine's trying to learn English were hilarious, and at the end I like melted when Henry was talking to Catherine and he kept calling her Kate repeatedly. It was just the sweetest thing, and yeah, so I really liked that. I wish there was more of that in this play, but it's more about war. So yeah, moving on to my 4-star reads for the month now. The first one was Jacoby by William Ritter. This is the first book in a YA paranormal historical fiction series, I guess, and it's about a girl who essentially runs away from home. She's looking for a more sort of adventurous life than her parents would like her to lead, and she ends up in America, and she is looking for a job, and she happens to run into this guy called Jacoby, who is a private investigator of sorts, but she learns that he has an ability to kind of see supernatural and like fantasy things that are going on around the city that they're living in. I really enjoyed this book. It reads like Doctor Who set in the 1800s with an underworld of like magical beings as well. It was really, really witty, and I think that's what gave me the Doctor Who vibes. You kind of have the feeling of the Doctor Who thing anyway, because it's like Jacoby and then this woman becomes his assistant or companion, if you were to putting it in Doctor Who terms. So it had those kind of vibes, and just the writing style was super, super, super witty, which I love. I'm really looking forward to continuing with this series. It kind of also reminded me a little bit of The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue, because it's a similar time period and a similar witty kind of writing style. The differences are that obviously The Gentleman's Guide doesn't have any fantasy or paranormal elements in it, and this book doesn't have any romance. That was the only thing it was lacking for me. I wish there was romance in this book, and I know not every book needs it, but it would have made me more invested in the story, I think, if there'd been there was like a little bit like hinted at, but yeah, I wish there was a little bit more of that. But otherwise, loved this book, would recommend. My next 4-star read is one that I have a full review on, so I'll link it in the info bar down below if you want to check it out and hear more about this book. But it is Of Poseidon by Anna Banks. This is another one that's the first in a series that I'm definitely going to be continuing with. Essentially, it's about a girl who is on holiday. I think she's in Florida, and she meets a boy who she thinks is really cute, but yeah, and then she goes to school and he shows up at her school, and basically the reason for it is that he is a merman. They don't call them mermaids in this book, they call them something else, Sirena. But he thinks she is one as well, but she doesn't know it, so he is trying to keep an eye on her to figure out if she's a mermaid. It's paranormal romance, I guess you would call it, and I really enjoyed this one. It was super fun. My next 4-star read is another novel that I had to read for uni, and this was a really, really brilliant one. It really impressed me, and that is The Joys of Motherhood. So this is another one along similar lines as Things Fall Apart, but also very different. This one is also set in Nigeria during or around the time of colonization. This one follows a woman from literally before she's born, so it talks about like her parents and how they ended up together and stuff, and then through her childhood and youth, and like how she ends up with, you know, how her family life turns out, and leading up to her death at the end of the book. It essentially just goes through her like day-to-day life and how they get by and her journey towards motherhood. Men have more than one wife and women have a lot of children usually, and there's like a hierarchy within the family depending on, you know, the age of the wife and whether she was the first married. And then if a man's like brother passes away, he has to inherit his wives as well, and as you can imagine it's like a lot of mouths to feed and things like that, and a lot of attention sometimes as well. So it was really interesting to read that, and to read from the perspective of a woman who has had like a really hard time in her life. So I found this book incredibly moving. It was, yeah, amazing. It did feel, I feel like this is the reason I kind of knocked a point off. It felt really, really long. It was just a little bit hard to keep up with at times because of that, because it's such a great amount of time crammed into a relatively short book. Overall though, it was definitely worth the read. Honestly, so moving, and I highly recommend this if you think you'd be interested in it. Moving on to my 5-star reads for the month. One of them was a reread for Classics Clique. Classics Clique is my Classics Goodreads book club. You can join it in the info bar down below. But our book that we chose to read in August was Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. It was really fun reread for me to breeze through, and I always love rereading Alice. It's just so like whimsical and silly, but kind of like thought-provoking at the same time. So really enjoyed this, and I think over this weekend I'm actually going to watch some of the Alice adaptations. I really, really loved as a child, I had it on video, an adaptation that was done in like, I want to say maybe the 90s, and it has a whole bunch of like really well-known actors in it. There's Gene Wilder, he's in it, and I can't really, Whoopi Goldberg plays the Cheshire Cat. I just loved that movie so much. So yeah, it was really nice to reread this one this month. If you reread it as well, or if you read it for the first time for Classics Clique, let me know your thoughts on it in the comments down below. My final 5-star read for the month is one that I've been dying to talk to you guys about. It was so good and really unexpected. I didn't think I would like love it as much as I do. It really surprised me, and that is The New Animals by Pip Adam. This is a New Zealand adult fiction book, and if I had to like stick it into a genre, I think I would say literary fiction. It's about a bunch of people that are working towards having a fashion photo shoot. So there are 3 young men that own the fashion label. I think they're in like their early 20s. This is all set in Auckland, by the way, which I loved because I lived there for a long time and it's just so like familiar to me. But also, so it's about those 3 young men. There's also a young woman who is their makeup artist, and then there is 3 older women as well. So 2 of them are hairdressers, and then one of them is like the pattern cutter for the fashion label. So she is the one who like actually designs and makes the clothes. So all of them over like 1 or 2 days are working towards having this photo shoot, and you switch between perspectives from all of them. It's essentially in a way about an intergenerational conflict, because the older women are kind of like sick of dealing with these young men who think they can just do anything at the drop of a hat. They don't quite see eye to eye on everything. So that's kind of a focus of the book, but also all of the characters have their own individual emotional baggage, like big time, but what I found interesting about this book is that it doesn't tell you what their emotional baggage actually is. It just reveals to you like how that affects their behavior towards one another and like how they act and everything. Also, I would say for anyone who's ever worked in any part of the fashion industry, like you know, fashion itself or hair or makeup or beauty, anything like that, I think you will find this book so relatable. As someone who worked in hair salons for a number of years, I found it so relatable, and I really kind of want to make my like hair salon friends read this book, because there's like, I mean, there's so much to it. It's so weird that I feel like a lot of people would hate it, but just those aspects of it, I know my friends who've worked in salons as well would just die for like how accurate some of the stories that come up are. Like these older women, they're kind of talking about back when they were apprentices first starting out, and just the kind like some of the stuff that goes down is just unbelievable. So I found that really relatable, and I enjoyed it for those reasons as well, even though that's kind of like not super important to the story, but it's just satisfying sometimes like reading your own experiences and finding it so relatable. So you've got like the fashion stuff, you've got the intergenerational kind of conflicts, and then there's environmental issues that are dealt with as well, and it was mind-blowingly eye-opening for me in regards to environmental issues, and that's something that I happen to have been really interested in lately as well, so it was just like perfect timing with that for me. And I think, yeah, that was really satisfying as well, because it's just something that I'm so interested in at the moment. I freaking loved this book. It's probably going to be up there with some of my favorite books of all time, but I will say that it's super weird. I'd say it's not for everyone. I know the shifts in point of view would be really irritating for some people because there's not much warning when it happens. The book isn't divided into chapters or anything, and it just shifts point of view very abruptly sometimes. Also just the fact that the first 2/3 of the book, they're literally just trying to get it together to have this fashion shoot, and they're all having like their own little dramas and stuff in between as well. So you kind of feel like nothing much happens. So if you're this kind of person who you need like a lot of plot to get you going, I think you might not like it. And then also like towards the end of the book especially, it's just very strange, which I know some people would just be like, what the heck, and they really wouldn't like it. So as much as I loved this book and I would love you all to read it, I feel like it's going to be a very polarizing book. You'll either love it or you'll hate it, and then some people might just be like, it was okay as well. So yeah, for me, I loved it, but I could totally see why people wouldn't like it as well. I think that is the longest wrap up I've done in a long time. It's definitely the most books that I've read in a month for a long time, which is really nice actually. So if you've read any of these books, let me know your thoughts on them in the comments down below. I would love to know how our thoughts compare. And if you're going to be picking up any of these books as well, let me know that too. I will see you guys with another video in another week or so. Thanks for watching. Bye.